Better regulation of the banks is definitely part of the issue.
Of course.
But you could have had foreign banks coming in,
I
and
wonder
indeed
about
Irish
this
banks
regulation of the banks, because
Poland.
the banks, like most industries, like most businesses, are there to make money for their shareholders. And the shareholders, particularly during that period that we're talking about, were demanding more and more profits for their own enrichment. And the management of the banks were part of the shareholders as well, and they themselves are making huge gains from this whole thing. Were incentivized
but in fact, what they were doing was they were involved in reckless lending, which was based on the assumption that the market was going to continue going up.
Isn't it inherent that once you incentivize bankers to lend more money, that there's going to be a crash? Isn't it inevitable?
Yes.
Unless it's taxed out, unless that profit, the profit on land. Remember, when you look at the total price of any property, it used to be, before the bubble, that the land element was about 15%. At the top of the bubble, it was over 60%. Now, would we need to come back to about 15% land element of property? And certainly for houses, to buy a house or an apartment shouldn't be more than, at most, 4 times your income. That's what we have to come back to.
Yes, I mean, your argument is perfect, right? But the point was that if you wanted to get land, right? I mean, I bought a site in Dominic Street for a fifth of an acre of land, and it cost me 4.8 million, right? But if I couldn't have got it if I hadn't paid as much as I did, right? Now, as it turned out, that job paid its way, believe it or not, right? But I agree with you that the thing had got out of control, and that the customer at the end of the day was having to pay for the crazy land price. Now, the builder wasn't making, I mean, the unit price was actually gone between 150,000 per unit to 200,000 per unit, and the build cost, if you were building properly, was close to 200. And even if you sold it for 400,000, gave the government their 50,000 VAT, you were only breaking even. So you had to get over 400,000 to make any money on it. But your point about the incentivising of the bankers, right, is a very crucial problem, because the whole bonus, the way banks were structured and the way banks were encouraged, and bankers, people working in them, were encouraged they were going to make, the more money they got out there into the system, the more they made. Irrespective of how risky it was, the more money they got personally, right? And for 8 years, they got crazy bonuses, and it went up and up and up and up. But when the whole thing collapsed, they don't give back their bonuses. The taxpayer picked up the bill.
Yes,
I mean,
I agree.
How can banks lose?
I'm afraid we've got to take a break, and after the break we'll preview tomorrow morning's newspapers. But maybe we'll come back when we can get Mike Wallace to join us again some other time in the near future. Join us after the break. Welcome back. By the way, I've known Mick Wallace for several years. I met him in his cafe, one of his cafes in the Italian Centre a few weeks ago. And I was sitting there having a coffee myself, and he came in and he joined me. And I thought he'd buy me a cup of coffee, the cup of coffee I was having. But no, and he just said, now you expect me to...
Vincent has been a little bit economical with the truth here, because I met Vincent about 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, right.
When he was making a fortune with the Sunday Tribune, and he asked me to put in a library for him. I put it in, and he still hasn't paid me. It's okay, Vincent, don't worry about it. I owe the bank so much money now, what you owe me doesn't really count anymore.
A bloody lie, I had to pay a fortune for it. Let's go. By the way, we're joined by Lisa Marie Barry, who's a journalist, and by Jared Gilroy of News Talk. For our very brief preview of tomorrow morning's newspapers. And let's get to the front pages right away. Go to the Irish Sun. Thank you, Jerry. Nation united in grief for Ryan funeral. Also on the left there, Quinn leaves group. That's his own group. The Mirror Champions League glory for Spurs, who beats Manchester City tonight and have 4th place in the Premiership. And therefore Champions League action next year. Heading there, United in grief, Jerry's two loves more, and DJ as nation prepares for funeral. The Irish Examiner, Greek tragedy, pregnant bank worker among 3 killed in fire. Over on the right, flight bans to be lifted as ash fears ease. Down at the bottom, parents enjoy first cuddles with little fingers as twins leave intensive care. In the Irish Daily Star, united in grief, Jerry's partner and wife share their pain. And in the Irish Independent, Euro crisis threatens to torpedo our recovery. Ireland on right track, but future of single currency now at stake. Over on the right, Fianna Fáil needs casting vote to save Dáil blushes. And further down the page, planes take off but volcano rumbles on. Brown, the Gordon Brown final plea to undecided voters. Quinn departure boosts rescue bid. We've got the Irish Times now, and it leads with UK election outcome on knife edge as voters go to the polls. And latest tax revenue figures show economy beginning to stabilise. Jar and Lisa Marie, you've had an opportunity to read the papers. Lisa Marie, what stories do you want to bring to our attention?
I think the big one at the moment is the Greek tragedy. 3 killed in the fire. It's just interesting here. They have what the protesters were chanting. They were saying, "We are not Irish. We do not sacrifice ourselves for the rich." I'm not suggesting that Ireland get out and do, go and have big fires and, murder people, but I think we could learn a lot from the Greeks in this protest today with regards to, protesting and standing up for cutbacks and stuff like that.
Burn down our Parliament building, for instance?
Well, I think make a stronger protest, because the reality on the ground, it's quite disturbing. And we are like, as a nation, I think we are lying down and we're just taking it. So I think I'm not inciting, telling people to go out and murder, but I do think that we need to kind of learn.
But how about burning down our Parliament building? What do you think?
Well, I don't think we're far from at this stage. Maybe we should.
By the way, there's a demonstration on Tuesday of next week, May the 11th, and I think it's going to go from Parnell Square to the Dáil, so maybe something will happen then. I'm sure it won't, by the way.
You're not advocating it.
No.
All right. Do you think, Vincent, that the protest should be a bit more aggressive on our part?
I think that it's surprising there isn't much more protest over what's happened.
Why do you think that's the case?
I don't know. I think there's a passivity. I think people feel helpless, that there's nothing they can do, and that's it. And incidentally, I think that's a lot to do with the grief over Jerry Ryan, that he gave people a voice and they now feel they don't have that voice for them.
But this predates the death of Jerry Ryan, surely.
Oh, it does, yeah.
The
But
I think
the grief reflects the fact that people don't have a voice, or feel they don't have a voice.
That's why the story's been so big over the last week.
I think, yes, but I think that's also has led to the apathy over what's gone on, the lack of demonstration, the lack of protest.
Is it also the lack of explanation? We don't really understand these numbers, that the figures are too big. You guys have spent the last hour talking about it, and I'm clearer now on what you all think about it, but still, these billions, we've become followers. Instead of following football teams and football results, we're following the spread and bonds between Irish, the rate at which Ireland borrows versus the rate at which Germany borrows versus the rate at which Greece borrows. And ultimately that is meaningless to all of us, except that it's why the country is in such a bad state at the moment.
They think there is no alternative, but in fact there is an alternative. There is other economic views about this crisis, but it does not get any media outlet. In fact, really, what should happen is the ECB should just simply distribute euro to citizens within the EMU area based on per capita, enough to get the German spending and enough to substantially reduce the debt of the PIGS nations. That can be done, and it can be done without
nations
debt.
Being Portugal, Ireland, Greece and Spain, yeah.
Yes, that could be done. There's no need for it to carry debt with it. It could simply be spent
but one of
better
the things,
than that, because it would go directly to governments, not to banks.
One of the stories in the papers, I'm sure tomorrow, is the European Commission's report on the European economies, and it's showing that there will be improvement in the euro, that the growth rate will start again in Ireland. There'll be 3% growth rate next year, which is really extraordinary prediction.
Unbelievable, I think, is the word.
I think highly, highly optimistic.
They haven't been that far adrift previously.
One of the great boasts of the government in the last while has been that, oh, can't you see that even the ECB thinks we're really good and we're doing things very well. The ECB is another bank, and if our government is handing money out to the banks and looking after the interests of big business rather than the interests of the average citizen, of course the ECB are going to approve. The ECB would much rather see us look after big business and recapitalise the banks and put them back on a footing, rather than, when the Chinese suspected that their economy was likely to take a downturn, they brought forward a 450 billion investment in social housing. Now,
we don't have it,
that to me is a far more sensible approach.
We don't have it. That's the problem.
Have the money, but the money that we gave the banks, right? If we had spent that,
I think
putting the money in at the very top, expecting it to dribble down to the bottom, is a bit fanciful. If you put the money in at the bottom, as you were saying, there's a far better chance that it'll trickle up.
Okay, the UK elections obviously tomorrow. One of the features of the UK debate is I don't bet, unlike some of the people you associate with, Frank. But the UK is in dire trouble itself, and it hardly features at all in the debate over the last while.
It's not in dire trouble, as much trouble as Ireland, because it's a sovereign government in control of its own money. So the UK is in a happy place compared to Ireland and Greece. Even though they're borrowed,
the borrowing rate
is
I think, larger, is higher than Ireland's proportion of
yes, but that
GDP.
actually doesn't matter, really. There are other views on economics that is not often expressed. I think this is the first time this will be on the RTE, that money does not have to be borrowed into existence. And if a government is in control of its own money, when it needs to, it can spend and not worry about it. It does it during wars. This is like a war. I mean, we're coming now to the same conditions that pertained in Europe in the 1930s.
Angela Merkel agrees. She's quoted in the front of the Irish Independent today, saying that this is the most important moment for Germany and for Europe in a very long time, that they've had to row in behind it and bail Greece out.
So we had a left-wing developer on the programme tonight and a left-wing architect, as well as a left-wing journalist and a left-wing sports commentator and a left-wing environment correspondent. Okay, that's it for now. For more tonight's programme, log on to tv3.ie. The weather's next from us tonight. Good night.